When hospital security guards tried to throw out what they thought was just another troublemaker, they had no idea they were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. The young black woman they were forcibly removing from the premises, she wasn't some random person causing problems. She was Dr. Amara Johnson, the hospital's youngest and most accomplished head surgeon. And what happened next didn't just shock everyone in that lobby. It exposed a truth about prejudice that would change everything forever. You think you've seen instant karma before? Wait until you hear what these guards discovered when they tried to escort out the very person who literally runs that hospital. This story will leave you speechless and remind you why you should never ever judge someone by their appearance. Because sometimes, the person you're looking down on is actually the one looking down on you from the very top. But first, let me take you back to where it all started. A quiet Tuesday night that was about to become anything but quiet. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, and Dr. Amara Johnson was finally ready to head home. She'd been on her feet for 18 straight hours, performing 2 complex heart surgeries and consulting on 3 emergency cases. At 28 years old, she was the youngest head of cardiothoracic surgery in the hospital's history. But tonight, she looked like any other exhausted young woman trying to make it through another long day. She'd changed out of her scrubs into what she always wore when leaving work: faded jeans, beat-up Nike sneakers, and an oversized Northwestern University hoodie that had seen better days. Her natural hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she carried her belongings in a worn leather messenger bag that had been with her since medical school. To anyone who didn't know better, she could have been a college student, a janitor, or just someone visiting a patient. But what nobody could see from looking at her was the weight she carried. Not just from the long hours, but from constantly having to prove herself in a field where people who looked like her were still fighting for respect. Every day she walked into operating rooms where some patients, colleagues, even nurses would do a double take when they realized she was the surgeon. Every day, she had to be twice as good to get half the recognition. Tonight felt different, though. She'd just successfully completed a procedure that other surgeons had deemed impossible: a complex aortic valve replacement on a 73-year-old man who'd been given less than a 5% chance of survival. When she'd walked out of that OR, she'd felt something she didn't often allow herself to feel: pride. But she had no idea that her biggest test wasn't waiting in the operating room, it was waiting in the lobby. As Amara pushed through the double doors leading to the main hospital lobby, she heard it before she saw it: the sound of someone in distress. Near the information desk, an elderly Hispanic woman was crying, speaking rapidly in Spanish to anyone who would listen. Next to her, a man who appeared to be her husband was clutching his chest, his breathing labored, and his face pale with sweat. Amara didn't hesitate. Her exhaustion evaporated as her medical training kicked in. She dropped her bag and rushed over. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" she asked in fluent Spanish, kneeling beside the man. The woman's eyes filled with relief at hearing her native language. "My husband, he can't breathe. His chest hurts so bad. We've been waiting for someone to help us for 20 minutes. Amara immediately began assessing the situation. The man's pulse was rapid and irregular. His skin was clammy, and the way he was holding his chest screamed cardiac event. This wasn't something that could wait for paperwork or insurance verification. This was life or death. "Sir, I'm Dr. Johnson. Can you tell me when the pain started?" she asked, already checking his pulse. "About 30 minutes ago," he gasped. "Feels like someone sitting on my chest. That's when everything went sideways."
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
The voice belonged to Marcus Thompson, a security guard who'd been working at Northwestern Memorial for 3 years. Marcus was the kind of guy who took his authority seriously, maybe a little too seriously. At 6'2" with a stocky build and a permanent scowl, he'd made a career out of intimidating people he deemed problematic. And right now, seeing a young black woman in street clothes touching a patient, he'd decided she was definitely problematic. "Step away from that man right now," Marcus barked, his hand already moving to his radio. "You have no business touching patients." Amara looked up, her hand still on the patient's wrist, as she monitored his pulse. "I'm a doctor. This man is having a cardiac event and needs immediate—" "Bullshit," Marcus cut her off. You're just some kid trying to play doctor. Security to the main lobby, we've got a situation. But what Marcus didn't know was about to shock him to his core. The elderly woman started crying harder. Please, she's trying to help my husband. He's dying. Ma'am, step back, Marcus said, moving toward Amara. This person is not qualified to treat your husband. Amara's voice remained calm but firm. I need you to call the cardiac team immediately. This patient is showing classic signs of myocardial infarction. Every second counts. I said step away. Marcus grabbed Amara's arm, trying to pull her back from the patient. That's when a second security guard arrived. James Rodriguez, who'd been Marcus's partner for the past year. James had grown up in a tough neighborhood and thought he could read people at a glance. Looking at Amara in her hoodie and jeans, he saw exactly what Marcus saw: trouble. What's the problem here? James asked. Got some wannabe doctor harassing patients? Marcus replied, still gripping Amara's arm. Probably looking for drugs or trying to scam these people. Wait until you hear what happened next. By now, a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. Other visitors, patients, and hospital staff were watching the commotion unfold. The elderly man's condition was visibly worsening. His lips were taking on a bluish tint, and his breathing was becoming more labored. Look, I don't have time for this, Amara said, her voice taking on an edge of urgency. This man is going into cardiac arrest. I need access to— The only thing you need access to is the exit, James interrupted. Marcus, let's escort her out. Together, the two guards began physically removing Amara from the scene. As they pulled her away, she called out in Spanish to the woman, Tell them your husband needs nitroglycerin. Tell them it's his heart. Enough, Marcus shouted. You're causing a disturbance and interfering with medical care. The irony of that statement would hit him like a freight train in about 30 seconds. As the guards dragged Amara toward the exit, something unexpected happened. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped Dr. Patricia Williams, the night shift supervisor. Dr. Williams was a veteran nurse who'd been at Northwestern for 15 years and had seen it all. But what she saw now made her blood run cold. What the hell is going on here? Dr. Williams demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. These guards are preventing me from treating a patient having a heart attack, Amara said quickly. That man needs immediate cardiac intervention. Dr. Williams looked from Amara to the guards, then to the distressed couple by the information desk. Her medical training kicked in, and she immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Release her now, she ordered the guards. Ma'am, this person is impersonating medical staff, Marcus protested. Dr. Williams stared at him like he'd just said the earth was flat. Impersonating? Do you have any idea who this is? Here's where things got really interesting. Marcus and James exchanged confused glances. Some kid trying to play doctor? James offered weakly. Dr. Williams's expression shifted from confusion to pure disbelief. This is Dr. Amara Johnson. She's the head of cardiothoracic surgery. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that lobby. Marcus's grip on Amara's arm loosened as the words sank in. Head of? What? Marcus stammered. Cardiothoracic surgery, Dr. Williams repeated, her voice rising. She's one of the most respected surgeons in this entire hospital. She's published in the New England Journal of Medicine. She's performed over 1,000 successful heart surgeries, and you just tried to throw her out for helping a patient. But the guard's humiliation was just getting started. Dr. Williams immediately turned to the medical emergency at hand. Dr. Johnson, what's your assessment? Amara quickly returned to the patient, who was now barely conscious. Classic presentation of STEMI, ST elevation myocardial infarction. He needs immediate intervention. I'd estimate he's got maybe 10 minutes before we lose him. Get a gurney down here now, Dr. Williams shouted to the desk staff. And page cardiology. As the medical team sprang into action, Marcus and James stood frozen, watching the woman they just tried to remove take charge of a life-or-death situation with the kind of expertise that only comes from years of training and experience. Start him on oxygen and get an IV going, Amara instructed the arriving nurses. I want a full cardiac workup and prep for emergency cath lab if needed. The efficiency and authority with which she worked was like watching a master conductor lead an orchestra. Every movement was precise, every order was clear, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. You're not going to believe what happened next. As they wheeled the patient toward the cardiac unit, the elderly woman grabbed Amara's hand. "Dr. Carter," she said through tears, "thank you for not giving up on us." Amira squeezed her hand gently. "That's what we're here for, Senora. Your husband is going to be okay." But Marcus and James weren't okay. They stood in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by witnesses who had just watched them try to physically remove the head surgeon from a medical emergency. The gravity of what they'd done was starting to sink in. Dr. Williams approached them, and the look on her face could have melted steel. "In 15 years at this hospital," she said, her voice low and controlled, "I have never, and I mean never, seen such a disgraceful display of ignorance and prejudice." Marcus tried to speak. "We didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't bother to find out." Dr. Williams cut him off. "You saw a young black woman in casual clothes and immediately assumed she was trouble. You didn't ask for identification. You didn't listen when she identified herself as a doctor. You just decided she didn't belong here." The truth was hitting them like a sledgehammer. "Do you understand that your actions could have cost that man his life?" Dr. Williams continued. "While you were busy trying to remove Dr. Johnson, that patient was dying. If she hadn't been here, if she hadn't fought through your ignorance to help him, he would be dead right now." James shifted uncomfortably. "We were just doing our job. Your job is to protect patients and staff, not to profile people based on how they look," Dr. Williams snapped. "Dr. Johnson has saved more lives in this hospital than you could count. She's worked here for 3 years, and her photo is literally hanging in the lobby as our young physician of excellence." Both guards turned to look at the wall display they passed every day but had never really paid attention to. There, in a prominent frame, was a professional photo of Dr. Amara Johnson in her white coat, surrounded by her numerous awards and achievements. But wait, it gets worse for them. Word of the incident was already spreading through the hospital like wildfire. Nurses were talking, doctors were shaking their heads in disbelief, and someone had already called the hospital administrator's office. Within 20 minutes, Marcus and James found themselves standing in the office of Dr. Robert Chen, the chief medical officer. Dr. Chen was not a man who minced words. He'd built his reputation on clinical excellence and zero tolerance for anything that compromised patient care. And what had happened in his lobby that night was about to become the perfect storm of bad decisions and consequences. "Gentlemen," Dr. Chen began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority, "I've just received a very disturbing report about tonight's events." Marcus and James sat rigidly in their chairs, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. "Dr. Johnson is not just any physician," Dr. Chen continued. "She graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School. She completed her residency at Johns Hopkins, where she was chief resident. She's board certified in both cardiac surgery and transplant surgery. At 28, she's the youngest department head in this hospital's history." Each fact hit them like a physical blow. The magnitude of their mistake was becoming clearer with every word. "More importantly," Dr. Chen said, "she's saved over 1,200 lives in the 3 years she's been here. 1,200 families who still have their loved ones because of her skill and dedication." The silence in the room was suffocating. "And tonight," Dr. Chen's voice grew colder, "you two decided that she looked suspicious. Now here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming." Dr. Chen pulled out his tablet and showed them something that made their faces go pale. "This is security footage from tonight's incident. I've already had to send copies to our legal department, our insurance company, and the hospital board." The video showed everything: Amara helping the patient, the guards grabbing her, her calm professionalism in the face of their aggression. It was damning evidence of not just poor judgment, but of racial profiling that could expose the hospital to serious liability. "Sir," Marcus finally found his voice, "if we could just explain." "Explain what?" Dr. Chen interrupted. "Explain how you physically assaulted one of our department heads. Explain how you nearly prevented life-saving medical care. Explain how you created a potential lawsuit that could cost this hospital millions. James was sweating now. We made a mistake, but yes, you did make a mistake, Dr. Chen agreed. A mistake that could have killed a man. A mistake that humiliated one of our finest physicians. A mistake that exposed this institution to legal action. And most importantly, a mistake that revealed the kind of unconscious bias that has no place in healthcare. But Dr. Chen wasn't finished. As of this moment, both of you are suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you out, and you'll surrender your badges and access cards. Don't bother cleaning out your lockers, someone else will handle that. The career-ending blow had been delivered. Marcus made one last desperate attempt. Dr. Chen, please, we've both worked here for years without any problems. Without any problems that were reported, Dr. Chen corrected. I'm now wondering how many other people you've profiled, how many other incidents we haven't heard about, how many other times you've let your assumptions override your professionalism. As security, different security guards escorted Marcus and James out of the hospital. Word was already spreading beyond the building. Someone had posted about the incident on social media, and the story was gaining traction fast. Dr. Profiled was starting to trend, with people sharing their own experiences of being judged based on their appearance. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. 3 hours later, Dr. Amara Johnson emerged from the cardiac unit with news about her patient. The elderly man, Roberto Martinez, had indeed suffered a massive heart attack. But because of her quick intervention, they'd been able to perform an emergency angioplasty that saved his life. He was stable, expected to make a full recovery, and would go home to his family. The waiting room erupted in applause when Dr. Johnson shared the news. Roberto's wife Maria was crying tears of joy, hugging everyone in sight and praising Dr. Carter, who refused to give up. Dr. Williams found Amara in the break room afterward, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee, still processing everything that had happened. "How are you holding up?" Dr. Williams asked. Amara took a sip of her coffee and sighed. "I'm tired of having to prove I belong here. I'm tired of people assuming I'm anything other than what I am. I'm tired of fighting for respect that should be automatic." "You shouldn't have to fight for that," Dr. Williams agreed. "But I want you to know something. Every person in this hospital who witnessed what happened tonight has nothing but respect for how you handled it. You stayed professional, you focused on the patient, and you saved a life despite being treated abhorrently." Here's the beautiful part of this story. The next morning, Dr. Amara Johnson arrived at work to find something unexpected. The entire surgical staff, doctors, nurses, technicians, residents, had gathered in the lobby. As she walked through the doors, they began to applaud. It started small, just a few people, but it grew until the entire lobby was filled with the sound of appreciation for a doctor who embodied everything healthcare should be about. Dr. Chen stepped forward and handed her a letter. "The hospital board met in emergency session this morning," he said. "We want to formally apologize for what happened to you, and we want to announce some changes." The letter detailed new mandatory training for all security personnel on cultural sensitivity and unconscious bias. It established clear protocols for situations involving medical emergencies, and it created a hospital-wide policy that any complaints of discrimination would be investigated by an independent committee. But the real vindication came later that day. Roberto Martinez, the patient whose life she'd saved, insisted on being wheeled down to the surgery department to thank Dr. Johnson personally. With his wife Maria by his side and his entire family gathered around, he took her hands and said something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Dr. Carter, when I couldn't breathe last night, when I thought I was dying, you didn't see my skin color or my accent or my old clothes. You just saw someone who needed help. You fought for me when others tried to stop you. You are what a doctor should be, someone who sees the heart, not the surface." The story went viral within days. News outlets picked it up. Medical journals wrote about it, and it sparked a national conversation about bias in healthcare. Dr. Amara Johnson found herself invited to speak at medical conferences, not just about cardiac surgery, but about the importance of treating every patient and every colleague with dignity and respect. Marcus Thompson and James Rodriguez. They were terminated after the investigation confirmed what everyone already knew. They had let their prejudices override their judgment, creating a dangerous situation and exposing the hospital to liability. Marcus eventually found work at a small-town security company, but the incident followed him. He never worked in healthcare again. James had a different trajectory. The shame of what he'd done led him to some serious soul-searching. He enrolled in diversity training courses, volunteered with community organizations, and eventually became an advocate for racial justice. He never got his hospital job back, but he found a way to turn his mistake into a mission to help others avoid making the same error. But the most important outcome of all was this. Roberto Martinez celebrated his 75th birthday 6 months later, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, his heart strong and his spirit grateful. He sent Dr. Johnson a card every year on the anniversary of his heart attack, thanking her for giving him more time with his family. And Dr. Amara Johnson, she continued doing what she'd always done, saving lives, training young doctors, and proving every day that excellence has no color, age, or gender. She just happens to do it all while being a young black woman who refuses to let anyone else's limitations define her capabilities. The lesson from that night at Northwestern Memorial Hospital is simple but powerful. Never judge someone by their appearance, their age, or their race. The person you're looking down on might just be the person who could save your life. Respect isn't something you earn through conforming to other people's expectations. It's something you deserve simply by being human. And sometimes, the biggest lesson in humility comes from realizing that the person you tried to push down was actually the one standing at the very top. This story reminds us all that prejudice doesn't just hurt the people we judge. It hurts everyone around them, including the people we're supposed to be helping. In healthcare, in business, in life, we have to do better. We have to see people for who they are, not who we assume them to be. Because you never know when the person you're dismissing today might be the person you need to save you tomorrow.